I woke up this morning to the news of yet another shooting, this time at a Mormon church in Michigan. 4 people have been confirmed dead. The motive behind this heinous act remains unknown, and perhaps we will never know since the perpetrator is also dead. But would it be so far-fetched to suggest that his reasoning might echo what drove Tyler Robinson to murder Charlie Kirk? Dear Christian leaders, wake up! If you haven't said a single word from the pulpit about the killing of Charlie Kirk, a fellow Christian, regardless of his politics, about the disturbingly callous reaction from some, or even the astonishing message of forgiveness from Kirk's widowed wife, then what does that say about the kind of faith you are preaching? It suggests a privatized Christianity, one focused solely on personal piety and unwilling to engage with the world beyond the sanctuary walls. And yet, many of these same leaders were outspoken when George Floyd, a black man, was killed 5 years ago. There were prayer vigils, there were protests. That wasn't private faith. It was faith applied to public injustice. It was the church stepping into the world to declare that something was deeply wrong in the way Floyd was treated, regardless of his questionable actions that day or his background. It was more than organizing cell groups or planning social events for young couples for the weekend. So what's changed? Why the silence now? Is it because of Charlie Kirk's politics and his association with Trump and Christian nationalism? If so, let me help by dispelling 3 myths. Myth number 1, America was once a Christian nation. Do you feel uneasy about the idea that America, especially during the colonial era, was a Christian nation? That we should return to that, as in make America Christian again? Defining Christian nation is tricky, but if we measure by church attendance, most colonial Americans never belonged to a church. Studies conducted before these issues became politicized show that after about 1650, even in New England, only 1/3 of adults ever joined a church. Rates were even lower in the middle and southern colonies. On the eve of the American Revolution, only about 15% of colonists likely belonged to any church. To boost church membership, so-called the halfway covenant was introduced in 1662. This compromise allowed unconverted nominal Christians into the church. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Like today's church, where we assume anyone who sits in a pew a few times a year is a Christian. Myth number 2, the founding fathers wanted America to be secular, meaning a public life completely devoid of religious influence. Nothing could be further from the truth. Ironically, you could argue that key founders like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, neither evangelical by today's standard, wanted America to be a Christian nation. Jefferson, a deist, and Franklin, who stopped attending church to study on Sundays, were pragmatists. They were willing to do whatever it took to make the great experiment of democracy succeed. And they believed religious people, not sectarians, were the best stewards of a liberal democracy that relied on persuasion, not coercion. That required citizens who would voluntarily refrain from infringing on others' rights. To them, religious education was essential so that we could have moral people. That's why Jefferson, despite denying the deity of Christ, allowed the Bible and a hymnal to be used for teaching reading when he chaired the District of Columbia School Board. He even signed the treaty in which the U.S. government paid a Catholic missionary salary and built churches for Native Americans. Franklin wrote, quote, "The most acceptable service of God is doing good to man, that our souls are immortal, and that all crime will be punished and virtue rewarded either here or hereafter." End of quote. Myth number 3, secularist interpretation of the First Amendment. America's history shows why secularists who insist on keeping religion entirely out of public life are both historically and constitutionally mistaken. The founders absolutely wanted the church to influence public policy, unlike those who want religion banished from the public square. Stephen Carter, Yale constitutional scholar, wrote, quote, "The religious clauses of the First Amendment were drafted to permit maximum freedom to the religious. It does not mean that people whose motivations are religious are banned from trying to influence government, nor that the government is banned from listening to them. End of a quote. Concerning all this, I agree with Charlie Kirk that the church should speak out when government infringes on freedom and liberty. But the church's task is not to become a government structure, as Kirk once insinuated, promoting those values. It is to serve as a robust watchdog, ensuring government remains a civic servant for all. Just as Martin Luther King Jr., as a pastor, spoke against segregation that limited black Americans' liberty, we, the Christians, should speak against abortion policies that expunge the freedom and dignity of the unborn, and against transgender narratives that harm vulnerable populations, especially teenage girls. Where I break with Kirk is his organization's marriage to the Republican Party. That alliance pulls the church into partisan divisions and may tempt us to echo the divisive rhetoric of Stephen Miller. I can and won't do that. We must remain neutral in party politics so that we can call out deviations from what is clearly biblical and historically constitutional, yet still contend for the core values of religion. What Emil Durkheim, despite being an atheist socialist, called, quote, a vast symbiotic system which makes social life possible by expressing and maintaining the sentiments or values of society, end of a quote. We cannot refrain from influencing government without compromising our calling. And if that influence happens to align with one party's platform, so be it. That's democracy at work. The founding father wouldn't have it any other way. In closing, I must admit I'm inspired by Charlie Kirk despite our disagreement. President Trump said at Kirk's memorial that Kirk, quote, loved his enemies and wanted what was best for them, end of a quote. Then contrasted himself by quipping, quote, I hate my enemies, end of a quote. Stephen Miller echoed that hatred, telling his political enemies, quote, you have nothing, you are nothing, you are wickedness, end of quote. No, we don't agree with that. Rather, we agree with Tucker Carlson, who said at the memorial service, quote, me, a recognition that the real problem is me and how fallen I am, end of quote. We are of Christ, who forgave his enemies. And Erica Kirk showed us how that is done. Don't keep your faith private. Speak up in truth and in love. And preach the gospel like our Secretary of State, who amazed us with a lucid presentation of the gospel.
God took on the form of a man and came down and lived among us. And he suffered like men. And he died like a man. But on the third day he rose unlike any mortal man. Because he took on that death, because he carried that cross, we were freed from the sin that separated us from him. And when he returns, there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and we will all be together.
In addition, contribute to an earthly society that is safe and secure for all people, regardless of their religion or lack thereof. May God bless America.